So check it out. I got myself a longboard press, and so I have been having a lot of fun and learning a lot pressing longboards in my garage. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the process of how I go from this and this to this. So come along for the ride and you'll see how it's done. And by the way, if you know how to do this, you're probably going to notice a lot of mistakes throughout. So don't be too critical. We're just having fun and learning here. So the first step of the process is to make a mold. And to make a mold, you need plywood. And typically you use Baltic birch, but Lowe's didn't have Baltic birch, they have maple, so I'm using maple. And I just have Lowe's cut this for me in 4-inch strips. We're also gonna need some glue, and these are gonna take quite a bit of glue, so I'm gonna get a couple gallons, and if we have extra, I need to press my longboards anyway, so got glue. So now that we have all these pieces cut, our next step is we're going to lay these all out flat, put glue on them, and then they're going to come up like so, and then we're going to clamp them together, and that's what makes the base of our mold. We got half of our mold done now, so we'll let this sit for a couple days, and then when this is dry, we'll do the other one, and then we'll take these to the CNC router. So in both cases, I forgot a step. I usually put a piece of plastic between the mold and these pieces of wood, which makes it a lot easier for us to remove these, but I didn't, so we have to make do here. Whew. Yeah, that's a mess, and I'm never going to do that again. Never going to make that mistake again. But like I say, we'll be able to get rid of this with the planer, so no problem. So I'm not sure how this one got misaligned. I think that just got pushed off track here when I was clamping and I didn't notice it. But that's okay because I've given myself a few inches off the ends here to cut off. So we're just going to square these up now and then take them over to where we're going to get them cut and routered. And where we're taking these is actually just a block away. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to point to it up the street here. So if you look up the street, you see a stop sign and then a building past that stop sign. That's where we're headed. That's how close my CNC router is. So where we are is a place called the Atwood Innovation Plaza. It's an extension of the college where they have a CNC router, they have a couple laser engravers, they have a bunch of stuff that is open, free and open to the public to just come in and work on whatever projects. And they also have grad students here who can help you with CAD drawing. So we're gonna come inside and meet Bailey, who does all of my CAD drawings for me for my molds. All right, and now over here we have Bailey. Meet Bailey. Bailey is my CAD designer. Say hi, Bailey.
Hello, everyone.
And in a second here, we're going to show you our CAD drawings, but first we're going to chop these up and plane them. Okay, our next step is to run these through the planer, which will make them completely smooth on top and bottom. Okay, so now Bailey is going to connect what she's got on her computer to the CNC router. So Bailey, walk us through what you've done. And I should say that this mold I'm making with camber. I wanted to experiment with camber, so Bailey, show us what you got.
Yeah, of course. So I'm using Fusion 360 CAD modeling software, and it also has a cam feature in it, so that way we can set it up with the CNC. This is the male part of the board mold. You can see our female mold as well. If I scroll in, you can see each of these lines. Those are pathways for the tool.
So I want these nice and smooth now because any roughness will be pressed into the top and bottom veneers and we don't want that. So I'm going to use just a little wood filler on some of these holes here, and then we're going to sand these down nice and smooth. So because these decks are so big and I have to use extra layers, I've been having a challenge with these in that they've been pressing out the sides. So what's happening is as the press goes down, the glue is really slippery, and so the layers are separating and pushing out the sides. And in fact, I actually ruined my last deck. I couldn't salvage it because all the layers squished out and I was never able to push them back together again. So I have an idea of how to fix this problem. I'm not sure if it's going to work, and if it doesn't work, you're never going to see this video. But what I've done is I've got these little boards here, and I've just glued 1/4 inch thick pieces right here, and I'll just screw these in like so. That will hold those sheets in. My mold is 12 inches wide and my sheets are going to be 12 inches wide, so they really shouldn't be sticking out. But if they start to push out the sides, then this should stop that while still leaving a gap for glue to drip down. Okay, it's an experiment. We'll see how it goes. Now I'm going to cut out my veneer layers. And I could use a table saw to do this, but I've honestly found that using a utility knife is honestly just as easy. So that's how I'm going to do this. And you're going to see how I have two sets here. One is the grains are running this way. These are our vertical sheets. And then on this other one here, the grains are running this way. So these will be our horizontal sheets. And I have a challenge with my veneers that I haven't been able to find the right thickness. They should be a 1/16 of an inch thick, and these are just a little bit thinner than that. And so what I have to do is do more layers to compensate for that. So for this deck, if I was using the right thickness of veneers, I would want to do an 11 ply, which I've learned from experimentation. But with the thickness of these, what I actually have to do is 15 ply. And so that's going to be 13 vertical ply and 2 horizontal ply. And this deck will end up being 50 inches long and 10.5 inches wide. And so I'm going to cut my layers 52 inches long and 12 inches wide. And that will give me some space on the sides just to make sure I have enough material to work with. All right, now we have all our layers ready to go. Now it's glue time. So I've got all my veneers here. I've got my 13 verticals and my 2 horizontals, and this shows how we're going to lay this up. I'm going to do 3 verticals in the middle, followed by the horizontals, and then you'll have 5 verticals on the outsides. Alright, time to get this in the press. And you can see how difficult these are to work with when they're all curled up like this. And that's what I'm hoping these will fix. And I'm putting it on this other mold just because that reduces the height that I have to bring the jacks down. All right, I think we're ready to press this. That's to catch our glue. So you can see how my solution did work. This just got pushed off to the side just a little bit, so I'm just trying to adjust that. All right, there we go. So now we'll just let this sit for a couple hours. All right, it's time to take this out of the press, and I gotta be honest, I'm concerned about this because I made a critical error putting this in. You're supposed to put plastic on both sides of the molds to prevent your sheets from sticking to the molds. And I forgot to do that. So let's take this out and see what we're looking at. All right, we're okay on the bottom. Let's see if we can pull it off the top. And actually, I'm gonna take these off here first. All right, fingers crossed. I forgot something. All right, not too shabby. There you have it. So now we'll let this sit and let the glue cure for a week before we start cutting it. So here we have our pressed sheets here. These have been sitting for a week, and now it's time to cut the shape out. And to do that, I have this template here that I've cut out using particle board. So this is what the longboard is going to be shaped like. And what we're going to do is use this as a template, and we'll trace this out. We'll first rough cut it with a bandsaw, and then we'll use a router. And I marked the centers on these when they were in the mold here, so I know what my centers are so that I can align that with my template here. I'm going to drill these holes so that I can actually attach this template to my glued sheets here, and then we'll keep it there to do all my cuts. And I was going to try to rough cut this with it together on the template on the bandsaw, but with this so close to the edge, I changed my mind. I'm actually going to take this off. We'll rough cut this with the bandsaw first, and then I'll put this template back on to use the router on it. So I was concerned about that being so close to the edge, but we're gonna be just fine. So now we're gonna take the router to this and fine tune that cut. Now it's routering time, and how this is gonna work is you'll see on this router bit, I have a bearing on that. The bearing will roll along the template and cut the deck below that, and it should match that perfectly to the template. And you want to be so careful with routers. Routers are very dangerous, so make sure you know what you're doing if you use a router, and be super safe with these. Now we have one more routering step. We're going to use this bit here to round off the edges on both sides. So here's what this looks like now, and you can see how it's not perfect, but there's nothing that some sanding won't take out. So now we've got nice rounded edges all the way around on both sides. Now it's sanding time, and this is the same workshop where I use the CNC router. All right, she is looking pretty close to perfect here. And so now it's time for paint. All right, it's time to paint now, and for this one I'm just going to use a clear coat, and it's a bit of a process because I don't have any way of like hanging this up, so I have to paint one side at a time and wait for it to dry and flip it over. So here we go with the painting. So here's the final product, and I gotta say, I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. It looks really good. And so all we need from here is grip tape. So let's take her out for a ride now, and if you stick to the end, I'll give you a report on how she feels. So here's the bottom line. I love this deck so much. She has instantly become one of my top favorite rides. So the very first thing that I notice is I've been riding mostly flat decks, and I really noticed the concave on this. It really helps with that rail to rail transfer. It's a really nice feeling. So I'm just really quite in love. That's a centimeter of concave. And I was honestly a little bit worried about the flex. The last one I made was 12 ply and it was a little bit too thick, too stiff. And then I did stand on this before I tested it, and I was honestly a little bit worried about the flex. Let me show you. But as it turns out, that's actually the perfect flex. Just as I suspected. I love it. I should say that I don't really feel the camber coming through. I designed this to have 1 centimeter of camber 18 inches back from the nose. So right here, about right here would have been the peak on that. But like I say, I just don't really feel it. And I think that if I were to try camber again, I would do it with at least 2 centimeters of camber on a deck of this length. But so I don't know that on my final design, I don't think I'm gonna go with camber. So this is 50 inches long, 10.5 inches wide. It has 1 centimeter of concave and it's 11 ply. And it's got a 34.5 inch wheelbase from inner bolt holes. And I gotta say that I really love the balance of the wheelbase. So I went with 4 inches from the nose on those holes there, and then 7 inches from here. And I've just, from experimentation, I found that that's the sweet spot on those. And so that makes for this perfect balance on the wheelbase where it just feels, everything about this just feels right. I'm really in love with this deck. And I went fairly wide on both the nose and the tail. And I did that for 2 reasons. Number one, it's just better for cross-stepping and for hanging 10, if that's what you like to do. So putting both feet up here like this feels really nice. You have nice wide space for both of those feet to sit there. The other benefit of going wide at the nose and tail is that it makes your deck wider where your axles go. And I've just found from experience that that feels a lot better to me. I don't like my wheels sticking out too far on the sides of the decks where my axles are. So that explains why I went wide there, and just perfect. I'm just loving it. And I'll tell you a little secret here. This finalizes my prototyping process where now I feel 100% confident taking this to a manufacturer. So actually, right after submitting this video, I'm gonna take my specs to a manufacturer to hopefully get this produced for mass production, hopefully by spring of 2025.